what's up, Groovy Sound Searchers? Welcome back to the Old Newspaper Plus. I'm your host, Courtney Lorraine, and I like to bring you very, very old news. Today, though, in honor of the Thanksgiving holiday, I'm going to go through some really old-timey recipes. We're going back like 140 years, okay? And it's been so much fun to search through these. I have been enlightened on a lot of things from back then. Food-wise, and I do hope to maybe do another episode in the next day or so to kind of look into all the different ways that people celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday around the world, because there are different festivals that are just similar to the American and Canadian tradition of Thanksgiving Day. But like I said, I hope to get into that in another episode. For now, I first want to explain a few quick little notes just to help everybody understand a few different ingredients and measurements that are mentioned in these recipes. I personally had to research these things myself just out of my own ignorance. Because I wasn't around cooking 130 years ago. So, first off, you'll hear the mention of a gill of milk. This is also noted as a teacup in other recipes, and it varied between 1/4 and 1/2 of a pint of whatever liquid was being called for. It was usually a milk or a cream. Second, saleratus, which is also noted as soda in some of the recipes, is just baking soda or the equivalent back then. Third is suet. Anybody who knows meat and beef in particular might recognize this. It's the raw, hard fat that's found around the kidneys and loins of both cows and sheep. So that's always fun. I'm not much of a meat eater myself. However, you do you, babes. Lastly, I have syllabub, which is a milk or a cream that was curdled with wine or cider and then sweetened. It's sometimes served as a drink or a topping, and other times it was thickened and served as its own dessert. So I don't think I would ever, do that myself, but hey, it was a long time ago. Also, I want to note, in a lot of these recipes, I noticed a lot of mention of oysters, which I didn't realize was such a big, popular ingredient in cooking way back in the day. Homegirl loves me some oysters, though. I'm not going to lie about that. And also keep in mind that these recipes are very old, so the instructions are not super detailed, and a lot of these people only had a brick oven to work with. If you don't know what that is, just look it up. We had one in the house that I grew up in, as a matter of fact. We never used it, though. It was just cool and part of the original structure. So don't expect a whole lot of, detailed instructions. But if you want to try some of these recipes, they are written for, people who are kind of experienced in the kitchen, might be able to actually work some of these recipes. So just keep that in mind. I think that's it for my intro. So let's get into some of these old ass recipes, shall we? This first collection of recipes comes from the year 1879. That was 143 years ago, just for anybody curious. This is, all of these collections, by the way, were sent into their local newspapers and published by readers of the newspapers, and this tradition in the newspapers actually started in the late 1800s and continued until the 1950s or something like that. So where they more became advertisements later on versus the original, which was actual old family recipes. So anywho, this collection was submitted to the Osceola Sun of Osceola, Missouri, USA. specifically for the Thanksgiving Day recipes section. Actually, all of these were written in especially for Thanksgiving Day celebrations. And I apologize to Missouri if I am mispronouncing Osceola. It's Osceola. That's how we pronounce it in Florida because it's also a place here. Anywho, in this collection, we have, first up, fried oysters. I was pretty excited about this. First, you get the largest and finest oysters and rinse them in clear water and then dry them, quote, quite dry in a cloth. Beat up the yolks of 2 eggs and thin with half a gill of milk. Dip each oyster into the egg and milk and then into a very finely powdered cracker crumbs. Let them lie for an hour and then dip them in the egg and crackers again. And then fry them in plenty of melted butter and lard, which must be so hot that it will brown them at once. They must be turned over in the boiling fat, and the whole operation must not take over 5 minutes. So secondly, up next, we have to make a nice pumpkin pie. Cut a solid pumpkin into quarters, remove the seeds, then bake until soft. Pumpkin is much sweeter baked than stewed and is not so watery. When done, scrape out all the meat and rub through the colander. To every quart of pumpkin, put 1 quart of rich milk and a cup of rich sweet cream, 2 tablespoons of molasses, and sugar to sweeten to your taste. Mix in 2 teaspoonfuls of salt, half a teaspoonful of cinnamon, 1 teaspoonful of nutmeg, 2 teaspoonfuls of ginger, and the yolks of 3 well-beaten eggs. Beat all well together, leaving no lumps of spice, and lastly, add the whites of the 3 eggs, beaten very stiffly. Line a deep plate with rich paste. Wet the edge and lay 2 strips of paste around. Then fill the pumpkin and bake it till you can put a knife blade in the center without it running. Quick little side note, you'll hear this rich paste thing. It's also called puff paste in a couple of recipes. It's pretty much just like a pie crust or a biscuit roll kind of deal, just so everyone is aware. Next up, we have Thanksgiving plum pudding. It says, open and soak about a dozen large crackers in new milk the night before this is made, or use the same quantity of sliced bread. Some good cooks butter each half cracker. Use a tin or iron kettle that holds about a gallon. This should be previously swabbed inside with fat that the pudding may turn out in good shape. Mix 4 beaten eggs with 2 cups of sugar equal to a pint, a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon each of ground cloves, allspice, and cinnamon, and 1 grated nutmeg. Half fill the kettle with alternate layers of crackers or bread and the egg mixture, and a good muscadel or box raisin, using a pound of the latter. Make the kettle 3/4 full with milk if to be baked in a stove oven, as it swells and runs over, but it may be filled to bake in a brick oven. It requires 3 hours to bake in brick oven and some less in a stove. The baking capacities of stoves differ. Cover it while baking if likely to burn, and it's better cold than hot, but nice either way, and may be served without sauce. So yeah, that one got a little jumbled in the middle. Some of these do though. Some of these are like, well, start out doing this and then but you guys catch on at the end. It's not hard. Next we have roast turkey with oyster dressing. So you dress and rub the turkey thoroughly inside and out with salt and pepper, and then you steam it for 2 hours or until it begins to grow tender, lifting the cover occasionally and sprinkling lightly with salt. Then take out and loosen the legs and rub the inside again with salt and pepper and stuff with a dressing prepared as follows. Take a loaf of stale bread, cut off the crust, and soften by placing in a pan, pouring on boiling water, and draining off immediately and covering closely. Crumble the bread fine and add half a pound of melted butter, or if it or more if it's to be very rich. Excuse me. Add a teaspoon each of salt and pepper, or enough to season rather highly. Drain off liquor from a quart of oysters. Bring to a boil, skim, and pour over the breadcrumbs, adding the soaked crust and 1 or 2 eggs. Mix all thoroughly with hands and, if rather dry, moisten with a little sweet milk. Lastly, add the oysters. Be careful not to break them. Or first put in a spoonful of dressing and then 3 or 4 oysters, and so on until the turkey is filled. Stuff the breast first. Flour a cloth and place over the openings, tying it down with twine. Spread the turkey over with butter, salt, and pepper, kept in a tin for this purpose. And place on the back of the range or stove. A swab made of a stick with a cloth tied to the end is better than a spoon to baste with. Turn until nicely browned on all sides, and about half an hour before it's done, baste with butter and dredge with a little flour. This will give it a frothy appearance. When you dish the turkey, if there's much fat in the pan, pour off most of it and add to the chopped giblets, previously cooked until tender, and the water in which they were cooked, now stewed down to about 1 pint. Place 1 or 2 heaping tablespoons of flour, it's better to have half of it browned, in a pint bowl. Mix with a little sweet cream. Fill it up with cream or rich milk and add to the gravy pan. Boil several minutes, stirring constantly, and pour into the gravy tureen. Serve with currant or apple jelly. A turkey steamed in this way does not look so well on the table, but is very tender and palatable, and it is an excellent way to cook a large turkey. And that's it for that collection. I just love the end of that last one. It's like, yeah, this turkey isn't going to look good, but I promise it's great. I love that. The reader felt like they had to add that in. It's adorable. People back then were adorable, except for the crazy ones. But that's still true today, I suppose. Next, this collection comes from the Reading Times of Reading, Pennsylvania, USA, and was published on November 25th, 1890. This collection does have the most recipes out of the 3 collections I chose, but I'll try to get through it pretty quickly. They're all short, so it shouldn't take too long. And this collection includes, first, turtle soup. Now, quick little note, I don't personally eat turtle. I don't eat a lot of meats though, so I'm technically a pescatarian, but I'm not. I love turtles. I could never eat one, but I do understand that there are a lot of cultures that do eat turtle, so I felt like it was not inappropriate to add this in. Anywho, turtle soup. Take the meat of a turtle, a quart each of veal and chicken stock. Season with herbs, pepper, and salt, and put on to boil. Add a slice of ham, 1 onion, and 5 or 6 cloves, and a blade of mace. Boil very slow. Take up, strain, thicken with butter rolled in flour, and let simmer slowly. Mix a teacup of walnut ketchup, the juice of 1 lemon, and a spoonful of cold water just before serving, and drop in the terrapin eggs, or a half a dozen hard-boiled yolks of eggs. So yeah, terrapin eggs, for anybody who might recognize that but doesn't quite know what it is turtle eggs. I had to look it up, I'm not gonna lie. Next we have roast turkey. This one's wild. Kill the night before cooking. Prepare a dressing of breadcrumbs with butter, pepper, salt, and herbs. Add 10 dozen chopped oysters. Fill the bod with the dressing and dredge with flour. Lay in a deep pan on a wire rest or on small blocks. Cook with butter. Roast a rich brown. Stew the giblets in a little water, which may be added to the gravy in the pan. Thicken with a little cornstarch and serve in a gravy boat. Garnish the turkey with fried oysters and serve with cranberry sauce. So that one doesn't sound terrible to me. The next one is mince pie. This is not a sweets pie like I was expecting. Mince pie. Take 5 pounds of beef, boil, chop fine with 3 pounds of suet, seed 4 pounds of raisins, wash 4 pounds of currants, and slice a pound of citron. Chop 4 quarts of apples, put in a saucepan with cinnamon, cloves, ginger, and nutmeg, and the juice of 2 lemons, 1 teaspoon of pepper, and 2 pounds of sugar. Pour over a 1 quart of cider, 1 pint of molasses, and a teacup of melted butter. Bake in a rich crust without tops, then bake the crusts of puff paste and lay it on. So, yeah, there's your meat pie for the holidays. Next up, we have grandmother's Thanksgiving pudding. Grate all the crumbs of a stale loaf of bread. Boil a quart of milk and pour it, boiling hot, over the grated bread. Cover it and let it steep for an hour and then set to cool. Prepare 1/2 pound of currants, washed and dried, 1/2 pound of stoned raisins, and a quarter pound of citron, cut in slices. Add 2 grated nutmegs, a tablespoon of mace, and a tablespoon of mace and cinnamon powdered together. Mix 1/2 pound of loaf sugar with 1/2 pound of butter. Mix with the bread and milk and add a glass of currant jelly and a glass of cider. Beat 8 eggs very light and stir into the mixture. Add by degrees the raisins and currants, dredged with flour, and stir very hard. Put in a buttered pudding dish and bake for 2 hours. Eat with pudding sauce. Next, we have Thanksgiving pie. Take 4 lemons, 3 eggs, 2 teacups of seeded raisins, 3 cups of sugar, 2 cups water, and a pinch of salt. Grate the yellow part of the rind of the lemon, cut off the white part and remove the seeds, then chop fine with the raisins. Beat the eggs thoroughly, then stir the other ingredients together and bake with 2 crusts. This will make 4 pies. That one, I'm not going to lie, that one actually sounds really good. I could definitely get into that. Thanksgiving cake is next. For this one, you stir together a pound of butter and a pound of sugar. Seems really healthy right off the bat. And stir together a pound of butter and pound of sugar and sift into another pan and add a pan and pound of flour. I might have miswritten that. Oh no, I'm sorry. Sift into another pan a pound of flour. Excuse me, that's 2 different steps. I got thrown off by so much sugar and butter. And then you add a pound of flour. Beat 6 eggs very light and stir them into the butter and sugar, alternately with the flour and a pint of sour milk. Grate in a nutmeg with a tablespoonful of powdered cinnamon, and lastly, stir in a small teaspoonful of soda dissolved in tepid water. Beat the whole very hard and pour into a greased cake pan and bake in a brisk oven. Next, we have pyramid a pyramid of tarts. An old-time Thanksgiving dainty. Roll out a sufficient quantity of the best puff paste, and with an all-over cutter, cut out 7 or 8 pieces of different sizes. Bake them all separately, and when they cool, place them on a dish in a pyramid, gradually diminishing in size, the largest pieces at the bottom and the smallest at the top. Take various preserved fruit and lay some of the largest in the lower tarts, and on the next place smaller fruits, and so on until finished at the top with small sweet meats, and the upper ones containing only a single raspberry or strawberry. So those don't sound too bad. I don't really like meats with sweet stuff. That's just me. Next, we have Thanksgiving buns. Boil little saffron in sufficient water to cover, strain and cool. Rub half a pound of fresh butter into a pound of sifted flour and make into a paste with 4 well-beaten eggs, and then add the saffron. Put the dough in a pan and cover it with a cloth. Set in a warm place to rise, and when light, mix in a 1/4 of a pound of sugar and a grated nutmeg and 2 teaspoonfuls of caraway seeds. Roll out the dough, divide into cakes, stew with caraway, and bake in flat tins. Next, we have a Franklin cake. Mix together a pint of molasses, a half pint of milk, in which cut up half a pound of butter. Warm just enough to melt the butter and stir in 6 ounces of brown sugar, adding 3 tablespoons of ginger, a tablespoon of powdered cinnamon, and a teaspoonful of powdered cloves and a grated nutmeg. Beat 7 eggs very light and stir them in gradually into the mixture, in turn with a pound and 2 ounces of sifted flour. Add the grated peel and the juice of 2 lemons, stir very hard, and put in buttered tins and bake in a moderate oven. So yeah, that's not so bad. Last one in this collection is called cranberry jelly. I'm not going to lie to you guys, I might make this one for myself. So first, for the cranberry jelly, to 1 quart of cranberries, follow 6 good-sized sour apples. Put the cranberries into a porcelain-lined kettle and add the apples after being peeled, quartered, and cored with them. Cover with cold water and stew until soft. Strain through a jelly bag and add a pound of sugar to 1 pint of juice. Pour into a jelly mold and cool. See, sounds super easy and delicious at the same time. All right, and that's all for that collection. I'm just going to go ahead and dive into this next collection, which was originally published on November 23rd of 1895. And it was published in the Boston Globe of Boston, Massachusetts, USA. I really want to go to Boston, I'm not going to lie. I want to travel through Massachusetts, but not for this holiday, but eventually. This collection includes my pudding, in which you have 5 tablespoons of pearl tapioca soaked overnight in a small cup of water. Put 1 quart of milk on to heat. When boiling, add tapioca and boil about 20 minutes, being careful not to let it burn. Add the beaten yolks of 3 eggs, 1 cup of sugar, and half a teaspoon of salt. Don't cook more than a minute after the eggs are added. When cool, flavor with vanilla. Eat very cold. Whip the whites of the eggs with 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar and a few drops of vanilla to use for a sauce. With whipped cream, it is a most delicious dessert. And that actually, the authors were actually put in with these recipes, and that came from a Miss Betsy Baker. And that was of, I assume, Boston, Massachusetts. She could have just lived in the area. Anyways, next we have potato puffs. Take cold roast meat, either beef or mutton, or veal and ham. Clear it from the gristle. Cut it small and season with pepper and salt, and cut pickles if liked. Boil and mash some potatoes and make them into a paste with 1 or 2 eggs. Roll it out with a dust of flour, cut it round with a saucer, put some of the seasoned meat on one half and fold it over like a puff. Nick it neatly around and fry until light brown. And that came from an AEG Roxbury. That one doesn't sound too bad if you like, raviolis and stuff. Next, we have veal pie. Speaking of more meats. Cut some veal into small pieces. After it's been stewed a little, put it in a pie dish with alternative layers of ham or bacon. Season between each layer with pepper and salt and slices of hard-boiled eggs. Fill up the dish in this way, then pour on some gravy that the meat was stewed in. With a little Worcestershire. I always have trouble with that word, as most people do. Worcestershire sauce. Cover with a short crust or a good puff paste and bake. And the author of that one is just labeled ERC. I'm not sure why they wouldn't use their whole name. That was a pretty good recipe. Next, this is in same collection of recipes, and at the end there's a section called questions and answers. I believe this was from previous recipes that was sent in, and other people had questions about it. So I think the question comes from someone named Brockton, and the responder just put their initials, which is LHH. And the question and answers. Molasses cake, 4 mg. 1 cup of sugar, 3/4 cup of molasses, generous ½ cup of butter, 1 cup of sour milk, 1 teaspoon of soda in milk, and 3 eggs, 3 cups sifted flour, 2 cups seeded raisins chopped, 1 teaspoon each of nutmeg and cinnamon. Beat all with your egg beater and don't have too hot an oven. This makes 1 large loaf if good, and it's good if done right. So, not to say that you can't do it, but yeah. So that one seems pretty easy though. So that Groovy Sound Searchers brings me to the end of our collections of recipes. Everybody, maybe go try some of those out. They didn't seem too hard. Like I said, not a whole lot of descriptive ingredients and instructions, but still seems doable for most people. I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving holiday for America, who we are celebrating it this week. This episode might actually come out on Thanksgiving Day. And for everyone in the world who has celebrated their harvest festivals and such previous, because some people start back in August and some people go until the end of November like we do in America. Either way, I hope everyone has enjoyed. I hope everyone stays safe. Have fun with your families. Have fun with your churches if that's what you do. Sing, dance. Americans, we decorate for Christmas. Excuse me. Everybody, please remember to go onto YouTube and subscribe to my channel. Just search at The Old Newspaper Plus. All words put together, all words spelled out. It's not hard to find, and I would really appreciate it. You can also find me on Instagram, _old_newspaper_plus. All words spelt all the way out. And on Facebook at The Old Newspaper Plus. All words spelled out. I always specify that you spell out plus in those, because when you search the platforms of which you find your podcasts, you actually use the plus symbol. But when I signed up for the social media, it wouldn't let me do that. So, yay, technology. Anywho, everybody, if you have any recipes of your own that you'd just like to share that are like super old from your, great grandmothers and stuff, please feel free to email me at theoldnewspaperplus@gmail.com. Everybody, have a great day. I'm Courtney Lorraine, and I like to bring you old news. Peace out.